Do I find a lot of accuracy in astrology? Yes. Am I saying this to you that this is 100% real and that you should also believe in it? No. But I do think it's a great opportunity to start to getting to know yourself by starting to get familiar with your chart, looking at it with curiosity. I don't need to convince others or others to agree with me on this. I am even open to the idea that this planet, like the filament, might not even be open. I am open to listening to any argument because I don't know everything. And that maybe the planets are just renderings in the simulation. I don't know. Do I believe everything that the NASA has been putting out? No. So many gaps that leaves you wondering, like, I don't know if I believe in this. But what I do believe is that even though this reality, this simulation might not be as real, that astrology can help us to understand ourselves because it shows us our kind of like our unique blueprint that we have in this simulation, this unique architecture and how we operate in this reality. And I believe that the only way we can start to have a grasp on this and really starting to getting introduced to this, to astrology, is when we start to open our minds to, that's when we start to get more receptive to all this information. I mean, there was a time in my life where I was very skeptic about this and I didn't believe in any of this. And this is why I'm really like people that are very close-minded, you cannot access to any of this information because you are looking at this reality from a very 3D point of view, you know what I mean? And as we start to learn about the stars and the meaning behind the stars and this knowledge that has been here for thousands of years, this is when we start to understand that humans has been disconnecting themselves from nature and from themselves. In the past, humans were much more in tune with the cycles of nature. I started to really get to dive into astrology and I wanted to learn about all of this. And it was about two years and a half ago, and I really dive in deep to start to really getting to know about like my chart and also astrocartography and human design. And for example, my chart, I feel like YouTube, it's a great resource to get to know all of this. I started to not only know all the signs and all, like, where it's my sun, my moon, my Mercury, and like as you keep going with this, you start to understand all the meanings behind each of the planets and realizing like, wow, I'm very mercurial, for example, and that you start to get to know really like your houses, for example, which to me is like the main part, the most, one of the most important things to, not just to know in what signs your planets are, but also in what houses. And people have always told me, you are so Gemini. And I am very Gemini. But that's because I have a Gemini stellium, which is basically that I have more than like 3 or more planets in one specific sign, which gives it an extra emphasis on that sign. I'm not only a Gemini sun, but I also have my Mercury and my Venus and my Mars in Gemini. So I understand when people that don't resonate with Gemini, like Gemini energy, or people that are not compatible with Gemini, like I understand if like I'm not their cup of tea. And I feel like a lot of people don't believe in astrology for the simple reason, and again, like I feel like a lot of people automatically like deny astrology because they only understand the very surface level of astrology. And but I feel like a lot of people do not identify with their sun sign, and this has a lot to do with, if you, for example, I mean many reasons, but one of them, for example, it's if you have a night chart, you are much more likely to feel more related to your moon sign. And if you have a day chart, I mean, I'm a Gemini sun and a Cancer moon, and I definitely feel that I'm a Cancer moon for sure, but I feel much more related to the Gemini. But it's because also I was born in a day with a day chart. But if you were born in a night chart and you don't feel too related to your sun sign, that it's probably because you are probably feeling more like your moon sign. And another reason might be that if you have another planet on your ascendant, that planet has a lot of influence in your ascendant. And maybe you have Jupiter or Venus or whatever other planet you have in like close to the ascendant, that has a lot of influence. But yeah, it's this and many other things about astrology that I can't deny that it's just so accurate in my life, for example. And another example, I'm a Leo rising, and this is like your rising sign or ascendant is how others perceive you and how you experience this world. And I can tell you that I instantly recognize another Leo rising because they have the same challenges in life. Leo risings have usually these very challenging experiences in their lives that other people try to dim your light, but you still want to express yourself. And it's getting over that shyness, which is very different than a Leo sun or a Leo moon, but even more, much more different than a Leo stellium, for example, which is like very Leo, very like, look at me, you know? Yeah, I feel like a lot of people that talk a lot about astrology without really knowing about astrology always talk about Mercury retrograde and Saturn return, which, to be honest, Saturn return can be really harsh if you haven't made the changes in your life that the planet Saturn, which is the planet of karma, limitation, structure, that it's asking you to make changes in your life. And I feel like when we go to our Saturn return, it's easier if you already have made the growth that you needed to do, the things that the planet Saturn is asking you to do, which has a lot to do where your Saturn falls in your chart, like in what house. But to me, something even harsher than my Saturn return was my secondary progressed moon return, which is basically when your secondary progression. I don't want to get too much into the specifics, but when your secondary progressed moon comes back to the same position as your natal moon. And to me, this was like even harsher than my Saturn return, because I feel like for my Saturn return, I already made a lot of changes and a lot of growth in my life, that it wasn't as harsh as a Saturn return if I just didn't do any of the work. But yeah, this one hit me hard, the secondary progressed moon return, because I was ignoring all this, like all of my emotional needs that were calling for my attention for a long time. Which, by the way, I think one of the reasons it's because I have my moon in Cancer, which wants to feel, and I have my sun and so many other planets in Gemini, which is like the very ADHD sign that just want, like, gets bored and move on to the next, and like it's like very it doesn't want to, it's not the one, like Gemini is not the sign that it's gonna stay and feel those emotions. Cancer, it's that. And like Gemini is the kind of like the opposite. So I have like this very conflictive chart in a way. But this is a time in your life that it's like you need to pay attention to your emotional needs. And I have my Cancer moon, it's in my 12th house, which this is a very important chart that everyone should know, where your moon falls in like what house your moon falls, because this says so much about you, and so much about how you feel nurtured. And everyone is different, everyone finds different ways to feel nurtured. And mine, for example, like many people would think like I feel I feel nurtured with family, or some people would be like, I feel nurtured from working, I feel nurtured from whatever. But mine, it's in the 12th house, which is the house of isolation, the house of solitude, faraway land. It's like kind of like the opposite of most people would think of how would you feel nurtured. But like it's the 12th house, it's like where everything, it's like the house of the unknown. So I feel like I come back to myself a lot from meditation, for example. And at that point in my life, this was screaming for my attention. I need my personal space, I cannot be just I'm very porous, you know. I mean, I feel the energy of everyone, and this was a time in my life that it was like you have to start to take care of yourself and your emotional needs. But for all these years, I was ignoring all of this and kind of like all this. How can I say this? This like the 12th house is also the house of the subconscious and the house of escapism because it's ruled by Pisces. Pisces is all about like escapism, and I have been numbing myself for years, you know, and at that point it was like it's asking you to pay attention to this. And this is why it's so interesting. Like I feel like once you start to get to know into like your chart really, it makes you really understand so much about yourself. But yeah, to me my Saturn return wasn't that hard, you know. It wasn't easy, but my progressed like secondary progressed moon return was way harsher because that was like kind of like the start of it. And I thought this around the same time, this one to me is like one of the hardest things I have lived through. That it's the like what was it? Nodal reversal, which is basically we all have our north node and our south node, which is basically our south node. It's basically what's familiar for us, and the north node it's our destiny, where we need to move on to in this life, where the universe is asking you to like that's the path you should follow. But yeah, during your nodal reversal, it's basically this is the point in your life where the current south node it's now touching your north node, and the north node it's touching your south node. So it's very counterintuitive, and I feel like people at this point in their life they start to, I mean, you feel like you're going backwards. This is the point in my life where I quit my job and I started to depend entirely on my parents' money again. And I went back home, I went back to my parents' home, and it's basically like the opposite because I have my north node in the second house, which is all about self-worth and value, and also like building your worth and your value also financially. And I feel like at that point in my life I went back to, it was very counterintuitive, and you're feeling like you're failing in life, you know, but it's kind of meant to feel that way. But yeah, these are just so many things that later I started to like, it started clicking on like with me. I was like very getting interested, and I would put a date, like a past date, and it would like completely align something, you know, and I would like started like paying attention to the pattern recognition. But yeah, another thing that to me is also crazy, it's my spiritual awakening that I had, like my first one, which was not planned, you know, these things are not planned. This was the first time that I tried magic mushrooms. YouTube, please don't take this video. This is for mental health awareness purposes only. But yeah, my spiritual awakening that I had, this is when Pluto conjunct with my, like Pluto was transitioning, and it exactly conjunct my natal Neptune, and Pluto is the planet of transformation, death, and rebirth. To me, it's like the scariest planet. To me, Saturn, it's not that scary. To me, Pluto, it's one that I have respect. But this is the when Pluto conjuncts Neptune, which is Neptune is the planet of dreams and imagination and in spirituality, and basically dissolving the boundaries between what's real and what's imagination, you know. And this is the time that I was like, and it's something that I wasn't planning, you know. So we were in nature and it just happened. And also like astrocartography, which is basically your birth chart, which is you like a screenshot of all the where the planet, like all of the planets exactly in your moment of birth. But it's basically that, but laid out all over the world, like with the exact lines. Like where was your Mars line when that happened? Where was your Venus midheaven line? And it's super interesting. And I can tell you that, I mean, I feel the energy in these places, and there's some places that it's very real. And when you travel to a specific line, you tap into that energy. But yeah, there's so many things, and I feel like this type of knowledge, people should start to be more excited about, to getting to know themselves and their chart, and they might find like very interesting things, you know. Like me, for example, I also have a Mercury conjunct Mars, which is, I feel like it kind of, like the way I speak sometimes, it sounds more aggressive and more like harsh than it is, because Mars is there. But it's actually like sometimes I don't even mean it to like be so passionate about something whenever I speak, but it comes out that way. You know, I feel like sometimes I have to like tone myself down, because other people, I in the past, some people told me like, why are you so angry? And I'm like, I'm just expressing myself. But anyways, I just wanted to share this. This is just for fun, to be curious, to spark that curiosity, but it's not to take it so seriously. And there is no good sign or bad sign in astrology. Every zodiac sign has the like bad qualities and good qualities. And what matters is if the person is developed, and if they are more evolved, they would reflect the more evolved characteristics of that zodiac. And if they are not very self-aware, they would reflect the more shadow aspects of that zodiac. And we need to stop with the so much judgment of the like some of the zodiacs. People are like, I don't like this zodiac. And it's like, we all, like each person, it's like a mix of so many parts about like the zodiacs and different elements. It's not, we're not only one sign. And don't get me wrong, I do believe in compatibility, but I feel like people put so many blocks that don't even need to be there. So yeah, just some things to consider, and hope you like this video.